being able to lead with analytics and really helping prioritize those claims that you need to work on right now is just really something that's unavoidable. So that's kind of the main.
You're listening to Beyond the Claim, the show for forward-thinking risk and claims professionals curious about the latest industry trends, winning strategies, and stories from influential leaders. Let's dive in.
Hello and welcome to Beyond the Claim. I'm Mark Cunningham, your host, and today I have with me Dennis Tierney. Dennis, thank you for joining us. How have you been?
Sure, Mark. Thanks. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. All things considered, been okay. In these crazy times, things are doing fine. So appreciate it.
I'm glad to hear that. I know these are definitely challenging times, and we're all trying to make the most of it. So Dennis is National Director of Work Comp Claims. Dennis, I know you've held multiple titles over your years, and I'm sure that you are, staying engaged in work comp throughout this pandemic. But before we dive into, work comp or the industry as a whole or your time at Marsh, can you give me some background for the audience of just your journey, your story? Start as early as you want to. It can be from elementary school or from college, whatever you're comfortable with. But what's the Dennis story?
Yeah, so, I'm a city kid, right? I grew up in the Bronx, New York, obviously a big Yankee fan. And then as I got older, we moved up a little bit north in New York. Went to Catholic school from kindergarten through 12th grade, went to an all-boys Catholic school. So I guess good and bad in certain ways, depending on how you think about that. Went to college, and my plan was to become a lawyer, right? So I majored in political science. I minored in law. Ended up going to law school for about a little less than a year, St. John's University, and it just wasn't for me, right? It wasn't everything that I thought it was going to be. So at that point in time, I ended up going and getting my master's. I mastered in public administration with a concentration in healthcare. Throughout college, I worked for the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. They have a health and welfare fund. So I did mostly health and welfare benefits. So I had a little bit of a background on that. But once I graduated graduate school and got my master's, I needed a job, right? And again, like everyone else, mostly everyone else in the industry, we got to insurance almost by accident, right? So I needed a job, and Liberty Mutual was hiring. So once our interview, didn't know much about workers' compensation, but they basically, I guess I did a good job because they hired me right on the spot, right? Either that or they just needed people. So they hired me on the spot, and I started my career back in 2002 as a workers' comp claim adjuster for Liberty Mutual. And here we are just about 20 years later, right? So worked for Liberty for about 4 years, and then started my career at Marsh in 2006. It was a great decision. Marsh has been great. It's a great company to work for. So again, here I am, and I guess, like many others, I'm stuck in the industry now until my career is over.
So what was the catalyst to shift from the claims, operations to the consulting side of the house?
I didn't really know much about it. What ended up happening was kind of like, what I do now somewhat. That person was on an account, and I was working at Liberty, and I guess they liked the way I handled myself and the way I presented myself. And there was an opening at Marsh, and that person who I got to know a little bit, recommended me for the job. And I'm always someone that is up for new challenges, right? I mean, honestly, like just handling the workers' comp desk there for 4 years started to get a little boring. So I wanted to see what else was out there and was up for a new challenge. And when I went for the job, I saw that it was a lot more involved than just workers' comp, right? There was a lot more that went into it. So that really interested me. I went for the interview at Marsh, was lucky enough to get the job, and here we are, in 2021, right? So it's crazy how things work out.
I've got to believe that starting off though as an adjuster just laid a solid foundation for you to operate, in the consulting space, understanding the work comp environment at such an intimate level. I know for me, I started off with Hewitt or Aon Hewitt, and then now Allied, on the benefit side, so I can align there. I stayed there a little longer than you, and only recently, over the last couple of years, transitioned to more work comp and casualty. But all along the way, I found, from a claims standpoint, for me, I didn't manage claims, but I did manage the technical component. So back-end business analysis, setting up computer systems, as well as third-party applications that were used for the administration. And I found that administering the benefits and understanding policies at that level have always allowed me to communicate more effectively and more comfortably, in various conversations, regardless of the type of program that I'm dealing with. Did you find that it actually helped you in that transition compared to maybe some of your peers at the time? Or?
Yeah, I would say definitely from a technical standpoint, it did, right? I mean, I have to say, coming from a carrier, at least back in 2006 when I started at Marsh, coming from a carrier to a broker was a little bit of a whirlwind, right? I mean, from a carrier, it was really structured. When you came to the broker back then, it wasn't as structured. And what Marsh kind of gifted me with was the accounts that they assigned to me. A good majority of them weren't even workers' comp; they were all liability, right? So I kind of almost had to learn on the fly. But to your point, it definitely gave me that technical knowledge in workers' comp. Definitely gave me that knowledge in how to just speak to clients and deal with clients and problem solve and find solutions, right? Because kind of what we do in our industry is we find solutions for clients. So definitely having that background with Liberty Mutual kind of set me up for success in that area.
Excellent. Yeah. So, fast forward to 2020. At the time, pandemic hits, and then we're in late 2021 now. Over the past 2 years, I know that we've seen some change in the industry in reaction to the pandemic, at least initially, accommodating customers and clients that were in the middle of the pandemic, and who knows, technically speaking, where we are in the phase of the pandemic at this point. But where have you seen the work comp specific industry change over the past couple of years? Where do you see it going in response to the pandemic?
Yeah, I would say, the one area, and obviously it was just like nothing we've seen before, right? I mean, the pandemic hit and, everyone worked from home, and I think my family saw me less when I was working from home during the pandemic than I was at the office, right? Because it was just nonstop. Yeah. But I think one of the main things that at least I communicate to our clients and even to my colleagues is what the pandemic has shown us is really you have to lead with analytics, right? I feel like, analytics have always been around, and it's always been something that we've talked about, and maybe it was kind of, not in the front seat, but more in the back seat. But with the pandemic, there was just so many things coming at you, so many things you had to take care of. So you really didn't have the time to manage, everything that you wanted, right? So you really had to prioritize those claims that you needed to manage, the ones that really had the ability to have, to blow up and to have really high exposures, right? And the best way to do that is to lead with analytics, to be able to use your analytics to help identify those claims to work on, right? So now what I say to our clients is, we need to lead with analytics, right? They need to be at the forefront. We don't know what's coming down the pike, right? The pandemic is still around, but being able to lead with analytics and really helping prioritize those claims that you need to work on right now is just really something that's unavoidable. So that's kind of the main thing that I've seen, and it kind of helped it push analytics to the forefront and making it kind of the number one priority that we have in managing claims.
And when you say, lead with analytics specific to, I know in general you're saying it's a strength and a must-have, specific to COVID and the pandemic. Did you find that there was a need beyond what currently existed to be able to track and trend at that level, or did you see that as on average that the market, your clients were in need, and the vendors, carriers, TPAs were prepared to some degree to provide that type of insight?
Yeah, I think they were prepared to some degree. I think like anything else, right? No matter what we have, we always can make it better and improve it. So I think, like I said, to some degree they were prepared, but I think the pandemic has even made us need to enhance that even more, right? really getting down and really being able to identify those things that we couldn't see with the levels of analytics that we currently have or models that we currently have, right? Being able to help drive models and create newer models and algorithms that can really get deeper and deeper, right? So I think the pandemic, it's a horrible thing, but and continues to be, but it forced us to kind of think differently and to utilize technology differently, right? We've seen that in the industry in many different ways, right? Telemedicine, workers' comp was really slow to adapt that. And when the pandemic hit, we really didn't have a choice, right? Because that was the only thing that was available. So again, to get back to answering your question, I think to a certain degree we were set up, but I think it only pushed us in the industry to get better and to get more advanced into, kind of leading with that.
And then, so in light of that, you've seen that evolution. I've seen some other products, outside of analytics that have been created in response to the pandemic. Where do you see things going over the, let's say the pandemic continues for another, 6-12 months? I'm sure that's impacting your clients directly and indirectly, depending on the industry they're in. Where do you see the need, the work comp market going, I guess, within that short term, and then maybe even beyond that as we, look to just kind of either reestablish the old norm or adjust to the new?
Well, I think the industry as a whole right now, especially I think, in the claim provider space, is really struggling just with talent and people, right? I think we've seen that across the board where whether it be that, folks have just retired or, there's just an abundance of a need of getting people, right? So my concern is that if the pandemic continues, that trying to fill that gap and fill that need is going to continue as well, which is definitely is having an impact on our clients. My hope is that not just from a claim, from a claim standpoint or an industry standpoint, but just for the world we live in, that the pandemic comes to an end, and with that, hopefully things get back to normal. What I mean by that is being able to fill those positions of people that have left or retired, being able to have those interactions in person that I still think are really valuable that aren't going on right now. So again, it's hard to predict where it's going. I know where we are now, and my hope is that with the pandemic hopefully getting better, that some of these issues we're dealing with will be able to be solved.
Agreed completely. All right, I know everyone has probably had their fill of pandemic talk over the last 18 plus months, so we'll shift gears a little bit. As you look, you've wealth of experience in the work comp industry. I have to believe you've come across some kind of misnomers or some misunderstanding concepts around work comp or the industry as a whole. Is there anything that, one or two items that might stick out for you that you want to correct the record on now that, with this worldwide audience that you have? Sure,
Mark. Thanks for that. To me, anyway, I feel like whenever you mention insurance to those people that aren't in it, it seems like people are like, really, insurance, or like insurance, like it's so boring, right? And I feel like that is really so wrong, right? Because what people don't realize is it's insurance is really a gateway to so many different things, right? I mean, just because you work in insurance, there's marketing, there's accounting, there's financing, there's communications, right? There's the stuff that I do, right? There's underwriting. So there's so many different things in the world of insurance that people could get involved in and work on. And maybe I'm biased, but I feel like a lot of those things are really interesting and exciting and dynamic, right? I know in my world, things are never boring because things are always changing and I'm learning every day. I'm not sure if you could say that in every single industry or every single job. So the one thing I'd like to get out there to those listening is that insurance is not boring. It provides great careers for people. And once you get in it, I think you'll see that it really is something that really could, enlighten yourself and you could have, a good, career path on it as well.
I think that's a fantastic point. I mean, I think within even the industry, as we're communicating out to, the general audience, that we should speak from a position of confidence and of appreciation for it. I graduated master's, but also my undergrad was in finance. there was no transferable, knowledge to this space. One, there was no opportunity to develop a degree, right, for this particular market. So that's an area where we have to improve. Although I know that there's, at least within the adjuster space, there's more of an educational path there. But even with graduate, go to a benefits outsourcing company and have done everything from technology to implementation to account management to sales to operations. And to your point, that's not necessarily always going to be possible across many industries. And whether I dabbled in a lot of different things or I only had a deep concentration in one, it has very little to do with the immediate perception that many have of insurance being, boring, legal-driven policies, right? And so, I think there's definitely a narrative out there that we need to change because there's a ton of opportunity. And as you mentioned earlier, with we're going through a wave of retirements, that we were working aggressively to account for as an industry. And I think we have to start with really recruiting some top talent into the space so that we're prepared for the long term. I mean, this is a critical industry that we're in to make sure that people are made whole and and remain whole throughout their life. So,
agreed.
I agree wholeheartedly.
Likewise.
So, that being said, you've been in the industry for a while, and you've seen a lot, and I'm sure some things that you would want to improve upon. So, if you're thinking, hey, I've got some magical powers, and I want to snap my fingers and solve for any challenge that might be out there, if I could do it today, is there anything that comes to mind? You say, we can do better. We should do better.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I'm not going to say it again. We talked about it. Definitely the talent gap, right? That's huge because again, that's the future. That's the present and future of the industry. Another thing which really dear to me is, and because of I'm involved in workers' comp, is kind of the dilemma we deal with in workers' comp claims with that whole psychosocial aspect, right, and the whole mental aspect of claims, right. I think as an industry, we've done a great job of kind of bringing that to the forefront, even before COVID, but even more so with COVID. But what we see is how that has such a huge impact on claims, and has, and even more important, has such a huge impact on people, right? So we're in the business of getting people the care they need and getting them, trying to get them back to work and making them better, right? So the one thing really, if I could snap my fingers, I would love to be able to find some way to help cure that, right? Or to find some sort of a solution around that whole psychosocial aspect, that mental aspect, which really hinders and impacts our injured workers and all the stuff that they go through, right? And even if you think about it, it's really throughout the course of life, right? I mean, people have so many challenges and so many things to deal with, and the pandemic has only added on to that, so much. So again, if I had that magic wand, I would love to fix that, because if we could fix that, I think it would just make the world better. It would make people be able to get better quickly. And selfishly for me and what I do, it would help reduce claim costs, right? So yeah, that would be my one major thing, that I'd love to cure or fix if I had those kind of powers.
So follow-up question. And so, we've seen nationally that whether it be our athletes or prominent figures that, much more willing and able to acknowledge when there are mental health concerns and components. I know it wasn't an option to the degree that it is as I was growing up, and I think that we as a society are thankfully more accepting and more supportive of individuals going through those challenges. Coming from the benefit space, a lot of the health insurance, the disability insurance was driven in some way or form to account for those types of circumstances, although there was room for improvement. I was surprised, though, at a jurisdictional level for work comp, that there were still the limitations in those types of benefits that there are in some places, not everywhere. But do you anticipate there being a change in light of the current temperatures, or that maybe we haven't seen to date, given some of the the jurisdictional components that are on the books today?
Yeah, I think we can, Mark, and I think it's already started, right? I think we've seen, with presumptions that, kind of when I talk about presumptions, like kind of changing the laws, we've seen a big push around that specific to COVID. But I think even now, as we move outside of COVID, we've seen jurisdictions changing laws, specifically more to first responders, right? Because those are the ones, people on the front lines where, maybe in the past, in some jurisdictions that put in a mental health claim, you might need a physical injury, right? Whereas now I think some of the jurisdictions are changing that where you don't, right? And that's kind of helped changing the laws. So I think that'll continue to kind of move forward. I think the industry is kind of starting with first responders, but I think it's going to kind of trickle down to those maybe outside those industries. Because to your point, I think as a society, we're realizing that it's so important and people are impacted in many different ways. So to not give them that ability to get the care they need or the support they need or the benefits they need is really a disservice. So I think it's starting, and I think it's going to continue as we move forward here.
Excellent, excellent. Well, Dennis, we're up against it. I do appreciate your time today. Very insightful, and I anticipate that our audience will, find what you've been able to share very rewarding. If folks want to get in contact with you, I know LinkedIn is very popular. Is there an easy way to get in contact with you? LinkedIn, assume would be your go-to.
Yeah, LinkedIn is definitely the best way. I'm on there. My contact information's on there. So if anyone likes to or wants to reach out, I'm always open and willing to meeting new people or speaking with those that I've met in the past. So it was great to talk to you as well. I really enjoyed it, and thanks again for the opportunity.
Thank you, Dennis. Great talking to you. Hopefully see you in person soon.
Yes, that'd be great.
You've been listening to Beyond the Claim, a podcast for risk and claims leaders. To ensure you never miss an episode, please subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast player. If you use Apple Podcasts, we'd love for you to give us a quick rating for the show. Just tap the number of stars that you think the podcast deserves. Until next time, stay curious and keep innovating.